Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome everybody to this week's edition of the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at sportsmen's issues from across the nation. This week, our lead story, bottom fishing closures off the table. What's next for Atlantic red snapper management? Chris Horton joins us here in a moment. Oklahoma passes sales tax exemption for firearm safety devices, including gun safes. Two bad bills in California bite the dust, recapping a very successful session in South Carolina. Pro-knife legislation advances in the Northeast as sessions wind down. And then finally, a look back at our Congressional Fishing Competition. All that and much, much more. Before we get to Chris, I want to acknowledge our sponsorships this week. The show is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops, Richard Childress Racing, Safari Club International for the week of June 9th, 2025. Thank you again to our supporters. Now let us turn to Chris Horton on location. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Fred, thanks for having me, and I apologize for the rather sterile background, but this is my hotel room. I'm down here at the South Atlantic Council meeting as we speak. So, but thanks for the opportunity to join you.
Yeah, tell us what's going on with the red snapper, and I think social media, at least the stuff I follow, I saw this quite a bit here in recent days. So, getting the lion's share of coverage. Why is it important, and what does it mean for Atlantic fishermen?
Yeah, it was a big announcement last week on the final version of Amendment 59 to the Snapper Grouper Complex, and what had occurred is NOAA was sued by some commercial fishing interests that we were overfishing. They continued to allow recreational fishermen to overfish red snapper, but in reality, that overfishing designation is really just a hypothetical on paper, which most of our stock assessments on federal fisheries management side is, and what we were seeing in the water and what we have been seeing in the water for the last decade pretty much does not reflect what the numbers on this theoretical exercise were saying, that we were overfishing, because we had the highest abundance of red snapper in the South Atlantic now than in recorded history. So we have more red snapper than we've ever had. But this overfishing designation gave them grounds to sue NOAA, and there was a settlement agreement late last summer that NOAA agreed to end overfishing red snapper by June of 2025. So they had to propose a secretarial amendment, which we saw in the fall, and that secretarial amendment, actually the first two actions in it, they did an updated stock assessment based on some new numbers and did some tweaks, and lo and behold, we were no longer overfishing red snapper nor our red snapper overfished. Unfortunately, that amendment, which those were good things. That's what we've been saying. The math is a lot better in this part of the amendment. But then there were several other actions, I think 8 other actions, that went well beyond the court settlement agreement and are completely within the purview of the council. But NOAA Fisheries was kind of forcing this on everyone. And one of the things in there that was proposed was a large area bottom closure for all bottom species. Now, this isn't just red snapper. There are 55 species in the snapper grouper complex managed by the South Atlantic Council. So you couldn't have fished for any of those.
Wow.
3 months out of the year. So that would have had a detrimental impact on overall fishing access. And it was unnecessary because it was trying to manage the one common denominator that is super abundant and healthy. So fortunately, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary Lutnick, they pulled that to phone it out. And they pulled out some other problematic areas and really focus on the fact we're not overfishing or undergoing overfishing. One of the reasons NOAA wanted to see the bottom closures is they thought they could give us a few more days for the red snapper season if they did, because the big problem is still MRIP's estimates of discards. So even if we only have a 1-day season, we're only harvesting 30,000 fish, it's saying that we're killing, another 400,000 fish because of dead discards based on MRIP's estimates. But those discard estimates are really suspect, and there's a lot of caution around those that these are likely not accurate, and we're confident that they are not accurate. But anyway, we have an opportunity to look at things a little bit differently moving forward, hopefully, because in addition to that bottom closure coming off, we're still only going to be limited to 2 days because of this dead discard issue this year. So that'll be July 11th and 12th in the South Atlantic, which is North Carolina and Florida. You'll be able to fish for red snapper again. Concurrently with the release of the amendment, the final amendment last week, the governors of Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina sent a letter, a formal request to the Secretary of Commerce to be able to assume state management of red snapper, just as we have in the Gulf. And we're talking about state management of the recreational sector. Because in 2017, we were kind of facing the same thing in the Gulf, where we were down to 3 days of red snapper fishing in federal waters. But the Secretary of Commerce at the time extended the season an additional 39 days, but told the states, get together, you got your own data collection programs, figure out how many fish in each state should be able to harvest based on, historical timelines and negotiate that and come back with a plan on how you guys can manage it. Well, they did, and it has been tremendously successful. So the red snapper season in 2024 was literally 24 hours. It was 1 day in the Atlantic. On the Gulf side, every state had at least a month and a half, 2 months of the season. Some states had multiple months. Where I fish in Alabama, we should fish from June 1 all the way to December 31st.
Wow.
So it's a tremendous difference whenever you provide the states with the opportunity to collect the data and not rely on MREP. And then to be able to monitor those landings in real time and to be able to shut the season down if they need to. But because we have better data, better monitoring, they haven't had to shut the seasons down prematurely. So it's just a much more efficient way to do it. And we're hoping that the Secretary will pursue that. And there's a way to do that. It's called exempted fishing permits, where you can fish differently than what the current regulations allow if you're trying to test something, if you can be more efficient. And so we're hopeful that the Secretary will issue those EFPs for those states. Florida's already ready to go. They already had their own state data collection program. They've been doing it in the Gulf now for 7 or 8 years, and they're doing it on the Atlantic side too. But management's still been based on MREP. So Florida's ready to go. Georgia and South Carolina are going to be a little bit further behind. They're going to have to come up with a way to monitor their landings using their own state data. But we're optimistic that we can get there. Something's got to change. Just doing the same thing the same way over and over again, expecting a different outcome is it's simply not working. So. And while I'm here at the council meeting, we've had some really good discussions this morning. I won't get into the weeds on the technical issues, but it's clear that we're always chasing data to fit in this box that we have for federal management. That's just not working. We've got to look at other ways to manage the fishery in real time on the population today, and can take advantage of when we have really high abundance, but also to be able to respond really quickly if we see that abundance dropping, whereas the current system doesn't allow this because we have 5 or 6, 7 years between data collection, analysis, and actual implementation. So it's a very lethargic process that's not very efficient. So we're really pushing the South Atlantic Council to think innovatively, think outside the box. How can we manage for sustainability, but also manage for maximizing access for recreational fishery?
No, I know it's, something we've covered quite a bit here together on the show. In that 1 day red snapper season, the juxtaposition between the Gulf states and Atlantic states, Southern Atlantic states. I wonder, where these other states are successful and they have their own programs, is it feasible to think that, you can almost do a copy and paste of one of those that would be more suitable for Georgia, South Carolina to come along a little bit faster and get up with the times?
Yeah, that's the great thing about the Gulf already doing this and finding a way to success, in that one of the things that was a challenge in the Gulf, or became a challenge after they implemented the program, is that all 5 of the Gulf states kind of had their own data collection programs. It was all dissimilar, but it fit for their coastline and when their anglers fish. Because when you go fishing offshore in Texas, it's different when you go fishing offshore on the west coast of Florida because of weather patterns and everything else. So you need to develop a program that is similar across states, so it's replicable and usable for management, but it also needs to be nimble enough to be able to capture the data in the best way possible and fit your anglers off your coast. So we've seen the mistakes that were made in the Gulf because they didn't have a lot of guidance when they were developing these. They're working now to bring some of those back together, but that benefits all the states that are just starting brand new. Like, okay, we got to develop a state data collection program, some way to supplement or get out from underneath MRIP, because that's our biggest challenge. So they already have kind of a playboard of what not to do and what has worked well. So they're in a much better position to start that. As far as copying and pasting, probably not, because you still need that little bit of variation between states, because
Sure.
South Carolina's coastline is much bigger than Georgia's, and Florida's coastline is bigger than both of them combined. So there's going to be subtle differences there,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if the data input is all geared towards providing the same level of accuracy and precision, and is usable for management, then that's the key. That's the key.
Yeah, I guess I should have amended my thought there and said, it's one of those, like, 80/20s. Can we get most of the way there,
Right. That's
what
it.
already exists, and then the nuances of that particular area, dial it in, but you're more than halfway there in the program, so let's start with that solid foundation, and the lessons learned stuff is wildly important as well. You're bringing them on, more efficiently and even faster.
Absolutely. That's a good analogy there, that 80/20 kind of split. We need about 80% so that we're all consistent and the data is usable, but we need that 20% flexibility to be able to maximize opportunity for anglers in individual states, as well as the ability to collect reliable information in those states.
Oh, very good. Chris, thanks for making the time. We'll leave it there. I know you got important work to do, so we'll return you to it and look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, thanks again, Fred. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. We'll see you soon.
See ya.
All right, my thanks to Chris. As always, good stuff there from him, and certainly uh, bigger issues at hand there. But right away, if we can get at least a 2 day season, that sounds far um, more encouraging, I guess, than that 1 day season as we talked about last year. And many people felt the burden of that. So, anyway, moving along here with the news. And before we do, my quick and weekly reminder to follow, subscribe, and rate the show. If you haven't already, I ask that you do it right now. Take you very minimal time, probably under 30 seconds to do the follow or subscribe. Spotify, Apple, iHeart, all of them allow you to do that. And iTunes and Spotify allow you to leave a star rating. If you would fill those stars all the way out, we would appreciate it. Helps the show move up in the find the algorithmic findability, for a lack of a better term. It puts the show out there to those that might be looking for something similar that are already listening to, and your participation helps. So we thank you. All right, let's head to Oklahoma, see what's going on there from Kent Keene. As it concerns tax exemption for firearm safety devices, including safes. Bipartisan victories, particularly those regarding firearms, seem to be an increasingly rare occurrence these days. However, Oklahoma's recent passage of Senate Bill 50 highlights the opportunities that exist to enact meaningful legislation designed to support the safe and responsible handling and storage of firearms while protecting the rights of law abiding sportsmen and women by exempting gun safes and similar devices from the state's sales tax. Oklahomans have one more reason to purchase these important pieces of equipment. Prior to adjourning for the year, Oklahoma legislature, as we said in the intro there, passed Senate Bill 50. It was led in the Senate by Oklahoma Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus member Senator Joanna Dossett, sorry, and in the House by Sportsmen's Caucus co-chair and National Assembly of Sportsmen's Caucus's Executive Council member, Representative Nick Archer. This bipartisan victory has been in the works for over the past couple legislative sessions, and CSF is proud to see it become law. The sales tax exemption makes it easier for Oklahoma's sportsmen and women to purchase the firearm safety devices designed to protect themselves and their families as they exercise their law-abiding firearm rights. In support of SB 50, Senator Joanna Dossett cited the results of an interim study conducted by the state that found Oklahoma taxpayers pay about $200 million annually as a result of gun death and injury in our state. It, the cost to implement this $178,000 program is a smaller investment that would pay towards bigger dividends. Kent has linked in the TSV article itself the results of that study. You can go check that out. Quote, SB 50 is a win for both freedom and responsibility, said Representative Nick Archer. He continues, by eliminating the sales tax on gun safes, we are empowering law-abiding gun owners to secure their firearms while providing meaningful tax relief to Oklahoma's Second Amendment community. It's common sense policy that protects families, prevents theft, and reinforces our commitment to safe and responsible gun ownership, end quote. CSF was proud to advocate for SB 50 as it progressed through the legislative process, and we look forward to the benefits that this bill will provide for sportsmen and women in the Sooner State. Apropos time of that, as well as we highlighted on our last feature episode of the Sportsman's Voice podcast, when we had and NSSF's Joe Bartozzi, the CEO and president there, on to talk about Child Safety Month, Lock It Up Week, and we cover all of this. And here's a really neat wrinkle that if your states aren't looking at, maybe something here to emulate, making this more affordable and really putting these safety devices in the hands of all gun owners, by helping them out. If you live in a state with a sales tax like that, I do not in New Hampshire, but we got other taxes that are crazy. So I won't pound my chest too much on that. Great story there. Thank you, Kent, for your reporting. Let's go over to California, where one Barry Snell has reported on two firearm bills that were killed or met their demise. Let's find out about it. Those bills would have impacted sportsmen significantly. They died this past week, and those were Senate Bill 15 and Assembly Bill 1187. Senate bill would have created an unfair system for FFL inspections by implying that FFL holders are responsible for what happens to firearms after the legal transfer is complete. Assembly Bill 1187 would have made it more challenging for new gun owners to acquire the necessary training needed to receive their firearm safety card prior to purchasing their own firearm. While firearm policy victories in a state like California may seem rare, sportsmen and women have something to celebrate following the recent defeat of those two bills. So starting with 15 here, Senate Bill 15, it targeted, in air finger quotes, bad FFLs, and among other things, created a list of the top 10 FFL holders who performed last legal transfer for recovered firearms. Example, those obtained by law enforcement and determined to have been stolen, used in a crime, or suspected of having been used in a crime. These 10 FFLs would then be subject to inspection, and if any violations were uncovered and failed to be resolved within 90-day grace period, would result in suspension of that license for a period of 2 years. While the sporting conservation community agrees that FFLs should follow all applicable laws related to the sale and transfer of firearms, Senate Bill 15 implies that FFL holders are to blame for the illegal trade and use of a firearm, and an implication to which our community takes great offense. While SB 15 initially passed out of committee, it was referred and failed to receive another vote prior to California's recent committee deadline. Yeah, that's a stretch. I mean, I know California is good for doing stuff like this on a myriad of topics, but if you're going through that 4473 and the FFL is doing the due diligence, and the state and the feds are coming back, whatever that that process is in California, and they're coming back good to go, and everything's been filled out. I mean, what more are you going to ask the FFL? They're kind of just the middleman who is the initially the first line of defense, and as long as that stuff's been answered true, I don't see how you could hold an FFL license holder to blame for acts committed by another individual. Um, and then further, if in that investigation it's found that the person has perjured themselves, which is explicitly written out on that form 4473. Again, hammer 'em. That doesn't. I don't think that criminalizes that FFL, nor should they be um, fined or subject to a 2-year hold on their license. They're not mind readers. They're doing the very best they can. And anyway, good thing it failed. Let's talk about Assembly Bill 1187, which would have, among other things, added live fire training to the requirements necessary to receive a firearm safety card. It failed to pass out of committee before the recent deadlines, effectively killing the bill at this time. While sportsmen and women often enjoy practicing at the range, the new live fire requirements would have potentially created a situation where aspiring first time firearm owners would be unable to complete this training due to California's existing prohibition on the transfer, including loan, of firearms to individuals who do not possess a firearm safety card. While the ambiguous language of the bill may have provided an opportunity for firearm safety instructors to furnish firearms needed to satisfy the live fire requirements as a part of their training, the sporting conservation community was pleased to see that the bill failed to advance protecting opportunities for aspiring firearm owners while preventing new confusing situations for those who wish to acquire the firearm safety card. Yeah, that's again, we're gonna require this, but you can't take steps A and B to get to C, and the only way you can get to C is if the people facilitating are gonna be good enough to supply, um, those firearms, and if, as Barry's reporting, if it was that ambiguous, if they're not carving out for those facilitators a training situation, they're technically in in in, uh in a bad way with this potential bill that died because even just the loaner would put the facilitator in a jam? I mean, folks, if you folks are writing this stuff, you gotta think it through, and if there's a question, again, I say it every week, we stand, ready to help and work with you to explain, the full, ripple effect, the totality of some of this policy. Again, fortunately, these both failed to advance, but, man, had they not failed and moved forward, well, a couple of really bad pieces of legislation could have gone forward and don't have to unless people are specifically looking to pass this stuff in order to put people in a jam, which, there are those in legislative bodies that have an anti-firearm, anti-hunting, agenda, and if they don't outright own it, I think you can tell who those folks are. I digress. Let's go to South Carolina, where Connor Barker is taking a look back at some highlights of the 2025 legislative session. Examples here: House Bill 3872, spearheaded by National Assembly of Sportsmen's Caucus's Executive Council member Representative Bobby Cox and caucus co-chair Representative Heather Bauer, would have limited the loss of available acreage open to hunting for South Carolina sportsmen and women. Senate Bill 165, sponsored by caucus member and former caucus co-chair Senator George Chip Campson, established the first ever South Carolina Conservation Education Fund. And Senate Bill 219, sponsored by caucus co-chair Senator Stephen Goldfinch, established a state waters season for the snapper grouper complex in South Carolina waters. We were just talking about that with Chris. So House 3872 sought to protect public hunting access on thousands of acres of South Carolina Department of Natural Resources management lands. CSF worked with the caucus leadership to formulate and introduce this critical piece of legislation, spearheaded efforts to obtain support of the DNR as well as in-state and national partners, and formed a coalition of over a dozen in-state national organizations to support the bill during the 2025 legislative session. These efforts resulted in the bill clearing the South Carolina House of Representatives without receiving a single dissenting vote. 3872 awaits further action by the South Carolina Senate next year, where the General Assembly reconvenes for the 2026 legislative session. Senate 165 established the first ever South Carolina Conservation Education Fund. Revenue distributed to the fund will be used for natural resources conservation education classes and programs, which are essential to help recruit the next generation of sportsmen in South Carolina and help sustain critical conservation funding needed to support the state's storied outdoor traditions. CSF submitted written testimony in support of the bill and worked closely with in state partners to advance the priority legislation. 165 sailed through both legislative chambers and was signed into law by Governor Sportsman's Caucus member Governor Henry McMaster on May 8th. Senate Bill 219 is a critical piece of saltwater fisheries legislation that will position South Carolina to balance conservation efforts with expanded recreational access to promote economic growth while serving as an example for other states looking to transition to a state management of their abundant fisheries resources in the coastal waters. CSF worked closely with several in-state national partners and signed on to a coalition letter of support for the bill. 219 passed both legislative chambers and was signed into law by the governor there in South Carolina. Finally, the caucus hosted a strongly attended legislative policy reception during the legislative session with numerous legislators and sporting conservation partners in attendance. Events that allow sportsmen and women to interact with elected officials to discuss issues impacting our time-honored traditions are essential in promoting access and making sure our voices are heard on issues that not only impact us today, but generations to come. While there were some wins in South Carolina this year, there's still work to be done. Over the remainder of the 2026, CSF will continue to coordinate with caucus leadership, specifically in the Senate, to build support for H. 3872 in advance of the 2026 session and identify additional priorities that pertain to hunters and anglers in the state. Planning is also underway for the annual South Carolina Southern Sporting Classic, which will be held on October 16th. This event will bring the caucus as well as our partners together for a day on the range to celebrate the wins in 2025 and give sportsmen the opportunity to discuss strategy for the next year, 2026. CSF thanks the caucus and its many partners on a strong showing of support throughout 2025 and looks forward to hitting the ground running in 2026. Heading up here to the Northeast, from yours truly, we had two bills that we want to highlight here. And just kind of start, for many years, some states have maintained vague and outdated laws banning the sale, possession, use, and manufacture of certain types of knives. It is not uncommon for many dated, unnecessary statutes to remain on the books for years and become largely ignored. However, the state laws can still cause legal issues if not clarified by overriding legislation. In the current legislative session, both Delaware and Vermont have seen positive results towards rescinding outdated standards. Getting into it, as previously reported, Delaware Senate Bill 108 amends the statute concerning switchblades, mechanical opening knives, by removing that knives must be folding and by increasing the allowable maximum blade length to 3 3/4 inches. In Vermont, Senate Bill 61 eliminates the existing prohibition on switchblades with a blade length of 3 inches or more. CSF submitted written testimony in support of the Delaware Senate Bill 108, and CSF also worked closely with Vermont Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus leadership to strategize engagement and support of Senate Bill 61. Issues of laws regarding knives are not necessarily what most people think of or consider from day to day as a tool commonly used throughout the trades, outdoors, or just everyday carry. There are statutes that vary from state to state concerning the legality of certain variants of knives based on how they open, operate, length, et al. The legislation session has been positive up here with positive movement to rescind outdated laws surrounding mechanically opening knives and blade lengths. As highlighted, Delaware Senate Bill 108, sponsored by Delaware Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus co-chairs Representative Jeff Spiegelman and Senator Brian Pettyjohn, removes prohibitions in Title 11 of the state code related to owning or possessing certain types of knives that may be opened by one hand. This relates to many cutting implements that are lawfully used as tools by many tradespeople, and they are also popular among the outdoor hunting and camping community and enthusiasts. 108 passed the Senate in May and was sent to the House, where it will be heard in the House Committee on Judiciary today, June 11th. So hopefully we'll have some follow-up there, some positive follow-up. Senate Bill 61 in Vermont, which removes the prohibitions on switchblade knives with a blade of 3 inches or more from the current law, has reached Governor Sportsman's Caucus member Phil Scott's desk, where it awaits his signature. Senate Bill 61 was sponsored and championed by National Assembly of Sportsmen's Caucus Vice President and Vermont Legislative Caucus co-chair Senator Pat Brennan this session. Senator Brennan, who has been a longtime advocate of such knife rights in Vermont, said, quote, "It's been a long time coming and a lot of work reaching across the aisle, and we finally got it passed." He continues, "It's common sense legislation on an antiquated law, no doubt." CSF thanks Representatives Spiegelman and Senator Pettyjohn and looks forward to working with Delaware Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus to encourage passage and adoption of Senate Bill 108. CSF also would like to thank Senator Pat Brennan for his dedication to this issue and working tirelessly over many years to get this legislation passed and onto the governor's desk. And we strongly encourage Governor Phil Scott to sign Senate Bill 61 into law. So great stuff. And as I said, it's not to downplay the knife rights stuff, but I think most of us, if you're not a knife enthusiast, and I know they exist, but if you're just out there putting a pocket knife in your hand or something like that, like, don't really consider that or even think that there's laws on the books for this stuff. Um, so it's important, not to get jammed up. And again, as the article said, and as I reported, rescinding this stuff is vitally important so that people aren't going to be put in a jam. I think as far as law enforcement goes, if you're ever in that situation, I think a lot of the lion's share of attention goes to, other deadly weapons, firearms, and the like. But, as someone that was in that space many, many years ago, part of that, if you stop someone, if you're, having to go through the rigors of a pat down or any, more in-depth search, one part of your spiel, before you get to that point is, do you have anything sharp that's going to puncture me, hurt me, any weapons on you, things like that. So, law enforcement officers going to go through that iteration and hopefully identify any things like that. All that to say, if a knife that is illegal and law enforcement knows it's illegal, but you don't, I mean, you're already in a stressful situation. If you've gotten to that point, never mind tagging on possession of an unlawful knife for no good reason, right? So anyway, good stuff there, working out in Delaware and great to get a piece of legislation on the governor's desk in Vermont. All right, let's close it out here. On June 3rd, we celebrated and had the Congressional Fishing Competition, where 70 attendees took part in the annual fishing competition. Hosted in the National Harbor, the Congressional Fishing Competition brings the angling community partners and stakeholders together to enjoy the great outdoors and also provides an educational experience on important fisheries policy topics and the conservation value of recreational fishing to attendees. This year, anglers taking part in the competition sought to catch blue catfish. Although a popular target species for anglers in other areas of the country where they are native, blue catfish are an invasive species in the Chesapeake Bay and present a threat to the ecosystem. The friendly competition offered a platform to talk about the challenges of managing blue catfish while also providing an opportunity to remove dozens of nuisance fish from the bay ecosystem. The event was also held in alignment with the National Fishing and Boating Week, an opportunity to jointly highlight the role that anglers play in conservation and the importance of access to the outdoors and wellness of our nation's natural resources. Quote, as we work to advance fisheries management, access for anglers across the country, and conservation of our nation's aquatic resources, events like this help us to highlight real world policy challenges. That from our own senior director of fisheries and guest from many minutes ago, Chris Horton. He continues, this friendly fishing tournament not only allowed us to talk about the enormous challenges we have across the country with aquatic invasive species, it also provided the opportunity for participants to make a small contribution towards reducing these threats these fish present in the bay. End quote. After attendees gathered at the marina for a brisk early morning, 11 charter boats took anglers out to the Potomac River and its tributaries for the catch and keep event. In total, there were more than 125 blue catfish harvested, with the largest blue catfish weighing in at a whopping 15.4 pounds. Bragging rights also went to the angler who caught the most fish during the day, which was 15 fish. Quote, the Congressional Fishing Competition continues to exceed our expectations every year, and we were fortunate to be joined by so many partners today, said CSF's Director of Federal Policy, Taylor Schmitz. He continues, working alongside these partners, CSF worked to protect and promote our nation's incredible time-honored traditions, and conservation efforts has led to many victories. On the water today, we had the opportunity to celebrate these victories, contribute directly to bay conservation efforts, and to set our vision forward on what is next, end quote. Some bragging rights here. The awards, most fish caught. We highlighted 15 catfish. Alex Feldman, who was in attendance, caught those fish. The largest fish caught was Rob Ogle with that 15 and near and a half pound catfish. And the most unique catch, Patrick Delaney uh, boated a green soldier man figure, removing trash from the Potomac as well. So, eco-friendly day all around. CSF would like to express our gratitude to the sponsors who made this event possible. Title sponsors include American Sport Fishing Association, Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's, Kelly Electric, Kelly HVAC, Nature Conservancy, Outdoor Sportsmen's Group, Richard Childress Racing, and Yamaha Marine. Host sponsors included Dallas Safari Club, Ducks Unlimited, Gunbroker, Hornady, International Order of Teddy Roosevelt, National Shooting Sports Foundation, Nuclear Energy Institute, Safari Club International, Shield, Shimano, the Kinetic Group, and the co-host sponsors included Bonefish and Tarpon Trust, Strata Clean Energy, and the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. Again, as always, guys, I encourage you to subscribe to the weekly newsletter that comes out every Monday, unless there's a holiday, and gets kicked to Tuesday nights, most of the time coming out right around or at 5 Eastern. That way you can go to the in article links, follow along as you listen to this or pause this, do your own research and utilize that resource that is available to you. It is free, as is our tracking the capitals. Even though sessions are winding down, still a good idea to create your profile there. It takes all of probably 90 seconds or less. And then you can go in and customize that to what states and what kind of legislation you're looking for and get those alerts as legislation moves throughout the legislative process during a given session. And you can remain current on that stuff. That's it. That's the show for this week. We thank our staff for their reporting, their contributions. We thank you for tuning in and listening every Wednesday. We really appreciate it. And, I hope you, the legislator, the policymaker that are listening, especially are finding this a great resource and, making the most of the relationship with your given sportsmen's caucuses in your states and certainly on the Hill with our federal staff and, also the reporting here. So thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow, we will have our feature podcast that I welcome in Marie Newmiller, Mark Lance. Marie is if you tuned in before, assistant manager in the Northwest. Mark is our assistant manager in the Southeast. And then yours truly, we're going to talk about predator management. Really a lot going on in that arena of the conservation space. And we take some really interesting turns during the conversation, stuff I personally never considered as we're talking about this in common speak. So do tune in for that. A lot of good information there, interesting stuff happening around the country, a lot of victories, and then obviously a lot of stuff we got to keep a pulse on and make sure the anti crowd does not get their way. So another great resource coming your way tomorrow. Until then, we will see you next Wednesday for our weekly, and then no feature next week, so you can get caught up on tomorrow's fresh drop, and then go back and listen to some of the other stuff that's been really great. Hope you've enjoyed it. As always, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation.
Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.